Be ready, guys. 5 seconds. Start. Sir, the Press Council Second Amendment Bill 2004 was introduced by me in the last session, as I submitted in my statement which I laid on the table of the House. I requested the House to consider the Second Amendment because an ordinance had to be issued since the life of the Council was expiring. Since the life of the present Council was expiring, we had to issue the ordinance. At this stage, I do not think I have much to say because it is a very simple bill. It is only trying to extend the life of the Press Council till the end of the year. If we are able to finalize the formation of the Press Council earlier, then of course the present term would expire earlier. You will recall I had said in the course of the last debate that a committee of members of Parliament has been working for the drafting of the second bill which is likely to come up before the end of this session. If time is made available, I will make every effort to bring it before this session itself. The committee has been sitting and they have been able to come to their conclusions more or less. It is now in the drafting stage and I hope it will be possible for me to bring the bill before the House soon. I would not like to go into the merits and demerits of the new bill at this stage. I would only say that it is a very simple bill extending the life of the present Council. I hope the House will approve of this at an early date so that I can go to the other House before the budget debate is taken up. Mr. Deputy Chairman, I welcome the Minister's statement that before this session ends, the government would be in a position to bring the Comprehensive Press Council Amendment Bill before the House for consideration because that would be the proper occasion for discussing the working of the Press Council in depth. He said that this particular bill which seeks to replace the ordinance is a simple bill. No doubt about it, it is a very simple bill, dealing with merely the term of the Press Council and giving life to the Press Council which would have otherwise expired even today. I do not object to the contents of the bill, but I take strong exception to the procedure followed by the government in this regard. It has been my general objection that Article 123 of the Constitution, which empowers the President to promulgate ordinances during the recess of Parliament, is a very special power. It is an extraordinary power which has to be exercised with very great caution and care and only in an emergent situation. Unfortunately, with this government, Article 123 has become a matter of routine. It has been stated in the statement by the Minister explaining why an ordinance was necessary that because the bill was introduced only on 21st December, there was no time to pass the bill as the life of the Press Council was due to expire on 31st December. For this reason, there was no option except to take recourse to an ordinance. My submission to the government would be that the government was fully in the know that the term of the Press Council was due to expire on 31st December. This was not something which suddenly came out. Why did not the government take prompt measures in time to bring forth a bill before Parliament extending the term of the Press Council instead of introducing the bill only towards the fag end of the session of Parliament and then making it a plea for promulgating the ordinance? My point simply is that Article 123 is not intended to remedy the negligence of the government. It is not intended to cover up the lapses of the government. It is intended to be invoked only in extraordinary circumstances when something new crops up which was not or could not be foreseen while the Parliament was in session. Suppose, for instance, between the 21st or 22nd December, when the Parliament session ended, and the 31st December something had happened which made it absolutely obligatory for the government to have recourse to the ordinance making power, then I could have understood it. But in this case, I would say that this is only another manifestation of the government's habit of taking recourse to ordinances. Rule by ordinance, I hold very strongly, is repugnant to the concept of parliamentary democracy. It denigrates and weakens the efficacy and primacy of the parliamentary institutions. It is on this ground that I oppose the promulgation of such ordinances. The Press Council has been in existence for 9 years now, and it was in 2004 that the Press Council Bill was passed. Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir, this discussion has come at an appropriate time when people in this country are very much concerned about the future of the press, its structure and its freedom, and therefore I welcome this opportunity to say a few words. I think that there is a good deal of misunderstanding, rivalry and tension between the parliament and the press, and the misunderstanding exists on both sides of the house. The usual attitude among the politicians is that if a newspaper supports their party, then it is independent, and if it criticizes their party, then it is the mouthpiece of the monopolists. Well, sir, it is not as simple as that. We all know that many parties, when they have been in power, for instance, the DMK, the CPM, all these parties have harassed newspapers when they have been in power. Sir, this is not a situation that is new to India. It exists in all democratic countries. To some extent, it is inevitable, and we have to learn to live with it. The tension and the rivalry arise mostly because some of the functions of the press and the parliament overlap. Also because the two institutions to a great extent depend on each other, and this results in a certain amount of resentment. There is also the fact that the press has a function to be a critic of the government, a watchdog of the government as well as of the political parties. And this is often misunderstood as hostility, but in our situation today, where we are still building a democracy, where democratic institutions have to be built up and sustained, and where our freedom has to be maintained, I think it is essential to create rather more cooperation and misunderstanding between the press and the parliament. I believe, sir, that one of the important functions of the press council could be and should be to act as a link between the parliament and the government on the one hand, and the press and the public on the other. I feel that some of the misunderstandings that have developed since independence between the press and the government are due to certain historical reasons. Before independence, the national newspaper existed for the national movement. There was no conflict between the two. The proprietors, the editors, and the leaders of our national movement were united for the single aim of removing the British government. But after independence, the situation became rather different. It is natural that after the achievement of freedom, there would be different interests and different ideologies represented in the press, just as they are represented in parliament. Therefore, to expect the press in India to support the party in power on all issues would be unfair and unrealistic. Sir, one of the complaints against the press coming from the government after the last general elections was that it did not reflect the will and the aspirations of the people, and that it has represented the monopoly interests. Even these allegations, sir, have been disproved to a great extent by those who have analyzed in detail the coverage of the last elections by the press. The fact is that a kind of distrust of the press has grown in the ruling party and in government circles, and their feeling is that our major newspapers do not support the basic policies of the government and that they are overcritical. Sir, I would like to say this. If the charge against the press is that they are dependent to a great extent on big business and that they are out of touch with the vast masses of the people, there are some truth in it. But can't it be said about many of our political parties? Can't we say that the Congress party has links with big business? Who can deny that many of our parties often lack a touch with the masses? So, sir, the press on the whole reflects what happens around it, and its situation is very similar to that of most of our political parties and of our political system. Sir, most journalists in this country would admit that there are many faults with the press today. One of the major faults which the members of the press have themselves repeatedly pointed out is that they are not in touch with the large rural areas to the country, and they tend to cater largely to urban middle classes. But the situation can ultimately be remedied only when we have higher literacy and education and development of rural areas. Again, it must be considered that the freedom of the press today is inhibited by the fact that it is run by large business houses, and commercial and other interests often impinge on the freedom and integrity of the editor and the journalists who work with him. So we all agree that freedom of the press should be strengthened. The government, the journalists, and the public are all agreed on this.